started out, the Republican Party, since the 1870s, has been the party of the rich and powerful. It's been the party of the wealthy families and the corporate elite. It still is, to this very day. It's the reason why all the Republicans are saying, health care? We don't need no stinking health care. That's for average people. We got our limousines and our private jets. We don't need no stinking health care. It's why the Republicans are saying, regulate banks? We don't want to regulate banks. We're the bankers. And on it goes. So, for a long time, the Republican mantra, back in 64, one of the reasons why Barry Goldwater crashed and burned in his election in 64. It wasn't, because Lyndon Johnson ran an ad with the little girl with the daisy going, with the Tommy. That ad ran once. And then it got pulled. It had some impact. But the main reason Goldwater went down in flames is because Goldwater was saying cut government spending. He was saying privatize Social Security. We don't need a larger government, we need a smaller government. And Americans at that time were saying, we rather like our government. It seems to be doing a pretty good job. We like the fact that the government is protecting us from foreign competition with tariffs and things like that. We like the fact that Social Security's never failed to deliver a Social Security check. And back then, by the way, you could actually retire on a Social Security check. We like the fact, it just went on and on. John Kennedy, keep in mind, had been the previous president, and he had said, we're going to make government even bigger by sending a guy to the moon. So the Americans, the American people at the time in the 60s were like, yeah, government, cool, big government, we like that. And the Republicans were running on the platform of small government so that we can have big and powerful corporations. Now, they never include the second half of that sentence. Never, ever. But 100% of the time, whenever you hear a Republican say small government, think in your mind, so we can have large and powerful corporations, because there is always the dynamic equilibrium. You always have both. There is always going to be that battle between the will of the people, which is represented by government, and the will of the very wealthy elite, which is represented by corporations and incredibly, mind-bogglingly wealthy families. And that dynamic tension, there's a certain healthy level to that tension, frankly, that I think that, for example, the Swedes have accomplished, and the Danes and the Norwegians, and most of Western Europe to a large extent. And then there's an unhealthy tension to it. And we keep going back and forth through these swings on the unhealthy region. So in 1974, a guy named Jude Wanniski, who was a Republican, he said, this is nuts. Why are Republicans running on the party of, we're going to be Scrooge McDuck, or Ebenezer Scrooge, rather? Why are we running on the party of, we're going to take away government programs? Why is it that the Democrats get to be Santa Claus and we're the ones who are always saying, no, you shouldn't do that? He said, we can double down. And he invented what he referred to, he invented two things. Jude Wanniski famously invented in conservative circles. William F. Buckley wrote a brilliant eulogy of him some years ago. He died a few years back, before Buckley died, obviously. And he's famous for having invented two things that all Republicans know about, and odds are you don't. One is the phrase supply-side economics. Jude Wanniski invented this in 1974. Made it up out of thin air. He said, we've got to come up with a different way to explain economics so that we don't tell people what we're really up to. They think we're up to something else. They think we're up to something that's going to help them. So we're going to say, if the rich and powerful, if the corporations get what they want and they do really, really well, it's going to help you, the average working guy. Because it's going to increase supply. If you increase supply, it's going to make the economy better. We could call it supply-side economics. It didn't make any sense then, doesn't make any sense now. When Ronald Reagan ran on it in the primaries in 1980, the guy who ultimately was his running mate, George Herbert Walker Bush, called it voodoo economics. Most Republicans knew it was a fiction, but there it was. So he invented supply-side economics, and secondly, he invented what's called the two Santa Claus theory. He said Republicans need to run as Santa Claus twice. When they're in power, When Republicans are in power, they need to spend like drunken sailors, even though they're not talking about it. In other words, increase the size of government, increase government programs, increase military spending, increase social spending, increase all kinds of spending you can, which is what Ronald Reagan did. He tripled the national debt. And don't raise taxes. So when the Republicans are in power, they get to be Santa Claus on steroids. They're more Santa Claus than any Democrat ever hoped of being in his life. And when Republicans are out of power, they get to be Santa Claus by yelling and screaming at the Democrats, "Don't you dare raise taxes. We're in favor of the little guy. And how dare you increase government spending? You're hurting the economy and you're hurting the little guy." And if Republicans would just do this, if they would just follow Wanniski's two Santa Claus theory, they would always win elections. And Ronald Reagan took that to heart. Wanniski was one of his advisors and did it, and it worked. Now, it destroyed America. Our economy is in the tank. But it works for Republicans. And that's what they're doing right now. It's what they're doing with the health care bill. It's what they're going to be doing with cap and trade. It's what they're going to be doing with the banking bill. This is the Republican strategy. When they are in power, huge deficits, lots of government spending, Santa Claus all the way. When they're out of power, cut taxes, Santa Claus all the way. And the Democrats end up being the responsible ones. The Democrats have to be the adults in the room. They have to be the ones who are complaining about the government spending when the Republicans are in office, which is stimulating the economy. So people are going, what's wrong with the Democrats? And when Democrats come back into office, they're the ones who are freaked out about the deficits. Here you have Obama today saying, and I quote, President Obama giving his sternest warning yet about the need to contain rising U.S. deficits. Uh-oh, he's Scrooge. You get it?